Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
As we continue our very early look ahead to the 2021 college football season, we've talked teams in the Big Ten, we've talked individual players in the Big Ten. Today, we focus on the coaches. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Big Ten podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ben Stevens. It is Monday, May 24th, and it's a Monday, which means it is the return of the Jay Stevens on our show, the Stevens and Stevens podcast here for a Monday edition of the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Jay Stevens, the host of Locked On Buckeyes, glad to have you back. Glad to be going over the 14 Big Ten coaches who were ranked by CBS Sports in order of how well they are doing their jobs. But Jay, pleasure to have you back on a Stevens and Stevens podcast.
Big Ten, Ben. I'm happy to be back with you. I'm happy to be back just talking football. We've done it quite a bit, but today it's about the coaches. We hear all about the players throughout the Big Ten, but what about those guys that run these programs? How do they rank up? Not just in the Big Ten, but also in the entire landscape, Power 5 landscape of college football. This, my friends, should be a good one.
I think it's going to be fascinating because as we have done our breakdowns looking ahead to the 2021 college football season, whether it was the spring football tour, the team win totals that we set and started here, or even some of the individual players that will be household names in the Big Ten Conference in the upcoming season, we haven't really touched on the coaches. And obviously, the coaches have an impact on everything that we have previously discussed. But now we dive into the coaches and the jobs that they are doing. And like Jay mentioned, not only a ranking within the Big Ten, and I'll give you the order here in a second that CBS Sports ranked, but in the order of all of the country across the nation in college football. So CBS Sports compiled a list of the top 65 coaches and the jobs they are doing for their programs at the moment heading in to 2021. At the top of the list coming from the Big Ten Conference at number 4 overall, unsurprisingly, Ohio State's Ryan Day. Number 8 overall, a little bit interesting, I guess, Pat Fitzgerald from Northwestern. 13 overall, James Franklin. 17, Kirk Ferentz from Iowa. 18, Paul Chryst from Wisconsin. 20, from Indiana, Tom Allen. 23, Jim Harbaugh from Michigan. 25 overall, PJ Fleck from Minnesota. Now we get outside of the top 25. Number 34 overall, Greg Schiano. 42 overall, Brett Bielema in his first year at the helm of that Illinois football program. 47, Scott Frost from Nebraska. 53 overall, Jeff Brom of Purdue. 57 overall, Mel Tucker. And 61 overall, rounding out the Big Ten Conference, all 14 coaches, Mike Locksley, the head coach of Maryland. So Jay, that's the long list that was compiled. What were some of the biggest surprises as you were diving through this list that CBS Sports released?
I think the most intriguing one that surprised me, because I was trying to see the Iowa-Wisconsin connection. Who would be higher? Would Ferentz be higher, 2 or 3 spots higher? Or would Paul Chryst be 2 or 3 spots higher? It was amazing to me that you got Ferentz at 17, Paul Chryst at 18, and I know you get the longevity of Kirk Ferentz there in Iowa and what he has done with that program. And I had to go back and look at it and say, well, has this man won any Big Ten championships? We know he won the Big Ten West in 2015, but for you to be top 20 on this list, you would have think you would have won at least 1, maybe 2 conference championships in your conference. Going all the way back, early tenure there in Iowa, 02 and 04 were the only Big Ten Conference championships he has won. Of course, Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer and Ryan Day at Ohio State, they have kind of ran the conference. But Kirk Ferentz, to me, it does make sense as far as the longevity, why he's ahead of Paul Chryst. But I know if you're an Iowa fan, you're excited. If you're a Wisconsin fan, you're saying, Jay, I hate you. I don't like what's coming out of your mouth right now, because I do think that Paul Chryst is better. I think in these rankings, you did see longevity kind of rewarded. Lincoln Riley, 1 spot ahead of Ryan Day. Longevity there of at Oklahoma versus Ohio State. And Brian Kelly, the longevity there at Notre Dame, but he really hasn't done much. I understand recency bias. Ryan Day, if you put Ryan Day at 5, Brian Kelly at 4, to me that's understandable. I wouldn't say, dude, you're crazy. But that Iowa-Wisconsin kind of battle, see it during the season. We see it here in the rankings as well. Ferentz at 17, Chryst at 18. That one stood out to me.
And Jay, I should have said, as we are going through these coaches' ranking, this episode today is brought to you by Built Bar. I need to eat a Built Bar because I forgot to do that. I need to be at my best in the strongest mental capacity. But as I mentioned, as we go through these coaches on the Stevens and Stevens Monday episode, today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Go to BuiltBar.com and use the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. So we take some of the clerical work into consideration. But to react to your point about Kirk Ferentz and Paul Chryst, back-to-back at 17 overall, in 18 overall, Kirk Ferentz 17, Paul Chryst at 18. I agree with your assessment. I actually think both of those guys probably lumped in that area because they are so consistent that each and every year, you know what you are going to get for the most part out of an Iowa Hawkeye football program and a Wisconsin Badger football program, what that product on the field is going to look like. There is some variance year to year, but overall, pretty much the same thing, at least what you can expect in your level of expectations for Iowa and Wisconsin. At times, I think it actually hurts some of their numbers because when you look at what Kirk Ferentz has done, the longevity and the numbers that he has put up, he could probably be even a little bit higher. I would say the same for Paul Chryst, who a lot of people thought inherited a great program in Wisconsin with a great track record, and that is the case after Barry Alvarez, after Brett Bielema, who was on this list as well. Paul Chryst came into a good situation to continue that model, that mold in Madison, but he has also done a great job getting to a couple of Big Ten Conference Championship games as well. So I think both of those guys being back-to-back right next to each other was almost fitting in a way at 17 and 18 because it's like they do the same thing for their two football programs. It's the Spider-Man meme in the Big Ten Conference. It's a mutual respect, I think, between Iowa fans and Wisconsin fans of the style of football that is played year after year. So I think the consistency there is really why you see Kirk Ferentz at 17 and Paul Chryst at number 18. One of the biggest surprises, I think, at least when you look at it from a national perspective, that I think folks outside of the Big Ten would be caught off guard by, is to see Pat Fitzgerald, the head coach of Northwestern, inside the top 10. It makes a ton of sense to me. With all the success he has had, from what he has brought Northwestern from to where it is now on a consistent basis, is absolutely incredible. Winning the Big Ten West in 2 of the past 3 seasons. You know what Pat Fitzgerald has the goal set for this program. It has been a complete overhaul since Pat Fitzgerald took over in the early 2000s. That's been how impressive Pat Fitzgerald has been at his time under or at the helm of Northwestern football. But I think some folks maybe from the SEC, the Big 12, ACC parts of this country would look and say, the head football coach at Northwestern is inside the top 10, ranked number 8 overall in the entire country. And I can understand that maybe from a perspective outside of what has Northwestern accomplished on a national landscape level. They've been pesky in the Big Ten pretty much every single season and have reached a Big Ten championship game, like I mentioned, 2 of the past 3 years. But that being said, I think Pat Fitzgerald does fit in there, and the direction that he continues to have Northwestern trending to, the facility upgrades that he has been a part of, all that he has done for Northwestern athletics overall based on that football program, I think it's a great thing to have him at number 8 overall. But I think some folks from other areas of the country would be like, what? Northwestern's head football coach in the top 10? What do you think, Jay?
I'm right there with you. I mean, you got to think about it. The guy he's in front of, Matt Campbell at number 9 at Iowa State. What has Iowa State ever done in football? I mean, just a legit question to ask yourself when thinking about these rankings. Northwestern football, okay, it's whatever. It's a program in the Big Ten. They're Chicago. That's about it. You go to Matt Campbell at Iowa State. You can have success in Iowa, but right, you don't really expect for 2 schools in the state of Iowa to be successful. So I do understand the Pat Fitzgerald thing. It is very interesting that Pat Fitzgerald is an individual that did play football at Northwestern as well. And Ben, I went to our good friends, over at the Wikipedia, and I just found out something that I did not know at all. I knew he played linebacker, that is Patty Fitzgerald, but he also played slot receiver, and that's in their playing career, the positions linebacker and then slot receiver. He has been at Northwestern in some capacity since 2001. So not only is he a former player at the school, he is also someone that's very entrenched there in that community, very entrenched there with those high school coaches, not just in the Chicago area, but also around the state. And so he knows the landscape. He knows the landscape of the Big Ten. He knows how the culture is in that area. He understands what it means to be the football coach at this school, and he understands how to properly build a culture and change a mindset so players and coaches there know we're trying to be successful. Everybody every year keeps talking about, and we've done it here as well, Ben, Iowa or Wisconsin, or maybe Nebraska might eventually win the Big Ten West. we almost sleep on the Wildcats of Northwestern. We almost forget about the success that they have had. And if we were to go back in preseason, yeah, we know about the players that they have and how good their linebackers are and a couple of DBs they had that were really, really good. But I still don't think people would have given Patty Fitzgerald the credit he deserves for building this team and creating a culture that cultivates winning, and players literally believe they can win. Think about this, and I'll close out with this, Ben. Big Ten championship game. Myself, a lot of other people really counted out the Wildcats. I said, yes, Ohio State should win, even with the COVID issues. Ohio State should probably win by 3 touchdowns because they're that good. Right. That defense of Northwestern really gave Ohio State some fits early until Trey Sermon really broke out and really broke open that game. It really didn't break open the game via the scoreboard, but on the field you could tell Ohio State was better. That's a testament, and that goes to show what Pat Fitzgerald has done and what he believes in the school. And I have to throw a little shade or a little comment for Tom Allen. That's the same thing Tom Allen's trying to do at Indiana. And he doesn't have the Indiana football tie to school. He does have the Indiana State, the whole entire state tie. And I do think there's a good chance what Tom Allen is trying to do, he can do it in Bloomington, because he says, if Pat Fitzgerald can do it at Northwestern, I myself could do it at Indiana as well.
I think what Fitz has done with I don't think anybody really across the country, there's not many coaches that have done more with less than Pat Fitzgerald. He has done a great job building up that program and now maintaining that success year over year. Still right now, Northwestern is not going out there and getting a stable of 4- and 5-star players. Not at all. They are developing to a great level. That's what Kirk Ferentz does really, really well at Iowa. You could say the same thing about some of the talent Wisconsin has as well, but specifically Iowa. They are a place that takes 2-star linebackers and turns them into 4 stars, and then by the time they end their college career in Iowa City, they are projected to go to the NFL. Pat Fitzgerald has created a similar system at Northwestern where he recruits really well. He recruits really well in the transfer portal right now. I think that's something he has taken a large responsibility for, and I think that maintained success for Pat Fitzgerald is why he is inside the top 10, number 8 overall nationally. That's CBS Sports ranked in this list. And I also think I like this list because it takes into historical perspective, but it also focuses on what has happened here as of late, which I think is fair. You take the good with the bad and having an understanding of all that plays into where these coaches rank on this list. You brought up Tom Allen. Let's go to Tom Allen, because in this entire list of all 65, especially in the top 25, no coach had a bigger jump from last year's rankings to this year's rankings, up 26 spots, was Tom Allen, the head man in Bloomington for Indiana University in that football program. He now ranks number 20 overall in the country. So Tom Allen, the biggest riser in this entire rankings. I can't say that was shocking based on what Indiana has done the past couple of seasons.
Ben, my next thought was to go to the bottom of this little top 25 list we have here, but we'll start with Tom Allen. What he is doing, and I think we saw via the recruiting, there was a McCullough, who I believe is the running backs coach there, and then I believe 2 of his boys are already there, and then he got his 3rd boy to decommit from Ohio State to stay in state and play in Bloomington. I believe he also plays high school football there in Bloomington as well, so it's not like he's leaving, he's going to an unfamiliar place, but you're with your family, with your brothers, with your dad. And I don't think that happens if there's not a belief there in Bloomington that Indiana can be successful. The Indiana can be a school. This Indiana team can be the school and the team to knock off a team like Ohio State. I believe they play in October of this year. There's something special going on right now in Bloomington. And as you know, I live in Indiana, so I hear about all of the conversation and Tom Allen, the boost in the salary that he just got, how players and coaches around the area really trust Tom Allen. He was a high school coach in the state, so he already has that appeal as well. I coach at the high school level here. I'm not Indiana, not your traditional football power. We're trying to make it a football school and bring guys in and, hey, decommit from this school, decommit from that school. Come to Indiana, you'll play, we'll develop you, and eventually you'll have a really, really good shot of getting drafted as well. That goes to Tom Allen, but I want to go down a little bit further, Ben. At 20, you got Tom Allen. At 21, Herm Edwards. 22, you got Mark Stoops at Kentucky, and that was an interesting one to me. But 23, Jim Harbaugh. 24, David Shaw. 25, P.J. Fleck. That 23-24 combination, that connection, it's an interesting thing. Just like you could tie in Kirk Ferentz and Paul Chryst, David Shaw took over for Jim Harbaugh. When Jim Harbaugh went to the NFL, San Francisco, if the lights don't go out in the Super Bowl, it's very well a chance that he does win the Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick as a quarterback. Ray Lewis doesn't go out lifting up the Lombardi trophy, doesn't go out on top in a winner. And we're looking at Harbaugh in a different way because of that. Now, I do understand it's a 60-minute game. Even if the lights don't go out in that stadium, a lot of things can happen. But if you were to talk to me, even after a couple of years that Harbaugh was at the school, and say in 2021, CBS Sports will compile a rankings of the top college football coaches in the country, and David Shaw will be at 24, Harbaugh would be at 23, I would say you're crazy. I would say you're stupid. I mean, at least I think Harbaugh will be a top 15, top 12, maybe top 10, based off 10 being Dan Mullen, 9 being Matt Campbell, and 8 being Pat Fitzgerald. You're at Michigan. You can recruit the entire state. Yeah, you have Michigan State, but you are the brand of the state. You have no problem recruiting, locally or nationally. You have no problem with facilities, with boosters, with money. You're going to sell out 110,000 people every single weekend. So you have no problem to be successful. Knowing what you did at San Diego, to Stanford, to San Francisco, and now you have the ability to be very, very successful. David Shaw is just steady. One of those guys out there out west who is just steady. He also has to deal with really, really hard academic standards at the school. So to be steady out there in the West Coast and Pac-12 country, that's amazing. But I am amazed that he is 24, Harbaugh's 23, and then Tom Allen is 20. Those three together, that really stood out to me when you look at the bottom part of the top 25.
Yeah, I'll react to a bunch of what you just said right there, because I think the thing for Tom Allen specifically, as he continues to ascend in these rankings, is going to be what Pat Fitzgerald has done and some of the other Big Ten coaches that we have highlighted, is creating that sustainable success. Is it sustainable in Bloomington? I believe it is, because of the head coach that Tom Allen is, because of the staff that he has assembled, and the talent they are bringing into this Indiana football program. But I think the national pundits need to see it be sustainable and something moving forward for Tom Allen. But I think that success will come. And I think Tom Allen in the Big Ten East is going to learn from a guy who's under his tutelage, is really where Tom Allen rose in his coaching career, that being Hugh Freeze. And Hugh Freeze talked about this during their time together with Tom Allen and Hugh Freeze, when Tom Allen was his defensive coordinator at Mississippi, was the idea that in the SEC, it wasn't that they were going to beat Alabama and Auburn and Georgia each and every year. But if they could knock them off every couple of seasons and be right there nipping at their heels, that would be a level of success for Ole Miss. I think IU can present the same thing in the Big Ten East, nipping at the heels of Ohio State, maybe knocking off the Buckeyes and Penn State and Michigan on a pretty consistent basis, that they are constantly competing for that second spot. Because, Jay, let's face it, until somebody dethrones Ohio State on a permanent basis, Ohio State is going to be the team to beat in the entire Big Ten Conference, but specifically the Big Ten East. And in that Big Ten East, a reason I think Jim Harbaugh is at number 23 overall is the lack of success against his biggest rival in Ohio State, and the downward trajectory we are finding the Michigan football program on throughout this past couple of years, especially capped off in 2020 with historic lows for Michigan, only going 2-4. And I think that is also brought into it. Is Michigan still a top 10 brand in all of college football? Absolutely. And I think the CBS Sports rankings even said that and how they reflected on it. But Jim Harbaugh and the job he is doing at the moment maybe is towards that latter half of the top 25, where you have guys like Tom Allen that are ahead of him and Pat Fitzgerald way ahead of them at number 8. I think in this moment for Jim Harbaugh, the coaching job he is doing is not up to the standards of what Michigan would want that to be, but Michigan itself as a brand still in college football, really all of college athletics, is still one of the premier ones in all of the country. The guy that they have at 25 and PJ Fleck, I think that's also another statement of how sustainable is the success that you have had. PJ Fleck has been a spark plug, whether it was at Western Michigan or now with Minnesota, and you saw what he did in 2019 with that 11 wins that the Gophers posted, but then a bad 2020, but it was a strange football season for everybody. Minnesota hit especially hard by COVID issues early in the year. They had a 2-week shutdown where more than 40 players, staff, and coaches all came down with the virus, something that completely threw their season out of whack. But now, can PJ Fleck get back to that 2019 level here in 2021? And Jay, I will say this, because we are coming up to the end of this Monday episode, as I lose Jay Stevens for a minute if you're watching on YouTube, but it works well because Jay Stevens will be joining us for a Tuesday episode because we're having so much fun talking about college football and these coaches in the Big Ten rankings that we have put out by CBS Sports. Jay, I think we're going to go for 2 episodes. So we'll end Monday right now